Betrayed by politicians. That's the topic of today's Bold and Blunt. And I'm your host, Cheryl Chumley, giving you a Christian conservative look at today's news, politics, culture, and events. How many times in America have you, as a conservative, voted for a Republican, whether local, state, or federal office, only to find out that the promises that said Republican made to you on the campaign trail have been forgotten? I mean, it happens too many times to count, right? It's really just the expected political atmosphere nowadays. We know going to the polls that maybe 10%, 20%, I don't know, on a good day, maybe 30% of what a politician that we're voting for promised is actually going to come true in office. And it's not always that politician's fault, right? They're not kings. They have to work with others. But at the same time, aren't you tired of politicians who at least won't make the fight? They won't make the public fight on your behalf for what they promised. I know you have to be tired of it. I sure am. Before I get into more of that, I want to quickly mention, if you like Bold and Blunt, you may get Bold and Blunt at edify.app, at washingtontimes.com, at Real Life Network, and wherever podcasts are offered. So again, the question is, how many times have you been betrayed by politicians who promise you X but don't even deliver Y? They just don't deliver anything at all, right? I remember back in Barack Obama days, John Boehner, who was the House Speaker, right, from Ohio, and he promised this and that. We had a big border issue, an open border issue, almost as bad as what we have now, but not quite, because Joe Biden has really pushed the open border more than American history ever before. But we had an open border problem due largely to Barack Obama. And we also had a debt issue. We had a blossoming debt issue, which I remember the times when Republicans used to care about the debt, right? The Republicans actually used to campaign on lowering the debt and lowering the deficit. And they used to talk about our future generations being enslaved to debt, our younger generations, our children having to work for the rest of their lives, paying tens of thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars from their own household just to service the debt. And yes, we had the attack on September 11th, and we had the creation of the Department of Homeland Security, which has grown into this massive organization, well-funded, right? America's security and so forth, and then come to find out that the deep state has abused certain elements of the Patriot Act under the Department of Homeland Security to spy on American citizens with no warrant, with no cause even in many respects. But we had the creation of the Department of Homeland Security, which added to our budget. But at least there was a rationale behind it. There was a cause for its creation. We were attacked. We were attacked worse than we've ever been attacked since World War II, Pearl Harbor, right? We were attacked on our own homeland. So the creation of Homeland Security, Department of Homeland Security, at least there was a logical justification for it. I think too much money now feeds into that agency, where we have other agencies already in existence who can do much of the work of the Department of Homeland Security. You know what? If you want to secure America, just shut the borders. Shut the borders for a year, for crying out loud. Shut the borders to all but legal migrants. Those who come here legally and go through the legal process and go through the assimilation process to become part of America's melting pot. Shut the borders, and that will address the majority of America's national security issues right there. But let's get back to politicians who betray the Americans who elected them to office. John Boehner, he's since left office, and he's left office to go back to his state to start a marijuana business. That's so morally wrong. I don't even know where to begin on that. But that's what he's doing now. But when he was in the House, when he was in Congress, how many times did he promise promise to not raise the debt ceiling, as Barack Obama kept pushing for, as Democrats kept demanding. And how many times did he break that promise? I mean, he put Bush with his no new taxes, failed promise to shame. He constantly went behind closed doors with Barack Obama and Democrats, and then would come out and slowly announce, slide into the press somewhere, mention that we have to raise the debt ceiling, otherwise this won't get funded, and old people will die, and the military won't be paid, and Social Security will dry up, and old people will die. John Boehner. And then he would shed some tears, right, to show that he was really, really sad about having to raise the debt ceiling, really sad about it, really bothered him, kept him up at night. And once the camera stopped rolling, the tears would dry up, and then he'd go off and have a beer with Barack Obama, no doubt discussing over a beer how next to raise the deficit, how next to raise the debt ceiling, and tax more Americans, take more money from hardworking Americans' pockets to pay for entitlements that the federal government could distribute and redistribute at whim, at their pleasure, in order to pay for votes, in order to reward those who voted for them, in order to dangle the possibility of entitlements, in order to secure votes for the next election. That's how it works, right? Politicians, by and large, are about keeping their power once they have gained their power. And maybe it's not so much in their minds an actual power grab, right? Maybe in their minds, the idea of keeping and maintaining power is all about doing good. That 2 years or 6 years, as the Senate is not long enough in order to accomplish all the good that they want to do, right? Or maybe they've started some good, but now they have to sidestep for a few months from doing that good, from continuing that good, because they have to campaign. And as part of their campaign, they promise to finish the good that they started, and then, tack on 1 or 2 more goods if the people so deem them electable again. So maybe in their minds, it's all about doing good. It's all about doing good for the voters, doing right by the country. Maybe it's about doing good and beating back the far leftists, the socialists, the communists who have taken over the Democrat Party. That's all well and good, but in the end, what it comes down to is they don't want to give up their power. They don't want to give up their platforms, which carry considerable power. And there are a lot of cushy benefits that go along with being a politician too, such as haircuts on the job. You remember, who was it, John Edwards, scoffing at the idea of Americans not being able to afford a $200 haircut? Actually, he wasn't scoffing. He was expressing concern that the average American couldn't afford a $200 haircut. And then headlines rang for about a month after, talking about how he thinks that's what most Americans pay for a haircut. Because most Americans I know, probably like most Americans you know, go down to the local chop shop, right? It's just the local chain where they have posted the prices right there when you walk in, and it's like $15 for a woman's cut, unless she has longer hair, and then it's $25, and then tack on another $5 for a wash, and another $5 for a blow dry, and $40 tops, and maybe $50 with a tip if they do a really good job, right? And then when the barber shops raise their prices from $8 a cut. I live near a military base, so there are barber shops everywhere, right? And they post their prices on the outside because they want to compete. They want to show that they're $1 cheaper, they're $5 cheaper. And over the course of the Joe Biden administration and Joe Biden's economy, I've seen barbershops rates go up from $8 a cut to now $15 a cut. And that's the deal. That's the bargain place. So when you look at politicians and some of the benefits they get, aside from Democrat or former Democrat John Edwards, because he had to run from office and he had to skip out on his presidential quest because of that little thing called the, oh no, adulterous out of wedlock baby. But back to what the politicians get in terms of cushy benefits, they also have doctors right there in their congressional halls. So you or me, right? We get a cold, we get sick, we get the flu. We have to take off from work, right? We have to take off from work. And then maybe we get sick enough where we actually have to go to the doctor's office. And that definitely requires time off from work. Some people get paid for the time off. Some people don't. Some people work by the hour. And if they have to take off 4 hours to run to the doctor's office, that's 4 hours without pay. Plus, it's whatever the doctor charges in terms of office visits, as well as prescribed medicines after. So we, the rest of us peon class in America, we all have to adjust our schedules to run to the doctor. Not to mention in the winter, right? Dragging out there on a cold day. Maybe your car's covered with snow and ice and you got to chip away at it and hope that your windshield wiper doesn't snap off because you moved it too quickly as you were chipping off the ice from your windshield. Get in the car and then drive down in the office where everybody else is sick and coughing and sneezing. Sit in an office with all those sickly people. So if you were only partly sick when you went there, you're definitely very sick when you leave. So that's what the rest of us do. But on Congress, on Capitol Hill, they have a doctor's office right down the corridor there. It's just a hallway step away, right? They just bop over there. Hey, I need some cough medicine. Hey, I need some NyQuil, which I don't know, NyQuil for a while, right? You had to go to the pharmacy and ask for it, show 18 forms of ID, and sign an affidavit saying that you weren't a drug dealer, and provide your medical history that you've never been treated for mental illness or some sort of drug addiction, and then they give you half a teaspoon of NyQuil in a baggie to take home, right? I mean, it was getting out of hand. It was getting ridiculous. You couldn't even buy NyQuil at CVS or Walgreens or whatever. Thankfully, I think maybe those days are past. I don't know. Once I did that, I stockpiled NyQuil. And I hope that doesn't get me in trouble by saying that with the federal authorities. But yes, I have a little stockpile of NyQuil just in case it ever goes on the do not sell list again. But in Congress, as I was saying, you don't have to worry about that stuff, right? You just say, I need this. And the doctor's like, okay, Mr. Congressman, okay, Mrs. Congresswoman, here you go. And then it's back to the office, right? And if you're tired, your office has furniture in it. You can just shut the door and take a quick nap on your couch, on your taxpayer-paid couch. Another benefit congressional members get, they get franking privileges, right? Those letters and correspondences that you get from your local politician, your federal politician, state, and so forth and so on, those are paid postage by taxpayers. They don't have to pay for their stamps. They don't have to worry about whether they have enough money to mail a letter overnight or whatever. They don't go through those cost analyses when they go to the post office. As a matter of fact, they don't go to the post office, right? They have people who do that. They have people who collect their postal messages in their own offices. But their franking privileges are tax-paid postage for them to clutter your mailbox with crap from your politician that you don't really care about or read anyhow, right? It just clutters your mailbox. If you want to know something your politician is doing, really, you just look online, because it's not like they're going to be forthcoming and tell you that they voted for this or voted for that if it's actually something that they promised on the campaign trail that they would or wouldn't vote for. They're only going to pat themselves on the back and point out what they think you want to hear in order to reelect them. So we pay for that, though. We pay for their gyms and, you know, their fitness centers and so forth that are right there on Capitol Hill, right there in the halls of Congress. So when they get that 2 o'clock yawner, like we all get, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, we start to sink in our energy levels. And a lot of us would love to be able to just bop off to the gym and do a quick workout, re-energize and so forth. But our gyms are down the road and our gyms are overcrowded, right? And our gyms, you know, on cold, wintry days, our gyms are just so far away. And yeah, we could do the YouTube video on TV, but sometimes that's a pain in the butt. And people who live in apartment communities, maybe they make too much noise jumping around in their apartments. Or maybe you don't have room in your home to work out in your home. Or maybe you have kids, right? Maybe you have kids and dogs that just, every time you try and do a workout video at home or something, they just feel they need to congregate where your feet are. Whether your feet are moving or not, they're going to be there. Well, in the hallowed halls of Congress, they have their own fitness rooms. They can just, hey, yeah, instead of eating lunch, instead of taking our little subway system to the cafeteria here in Congress, let's just go to the gym instead. And you know, that gym stays open 24 hours, right? Because I'm sure they have their keys for it. I'm sure they have their own access cards and so forth. They don't have to go during gym hours only. There are a lot of privileges that come with being a politician. And the biggest privilege of all is something that's supposed to be against the law, but who's looking, who enforces it, right? And it's called insider information. There's a reason why people who go to Congress, whether as a legislator or a senator, whether in the House or in the Senate, end up making a lot of money, right? They end up making a lot of money. They may start out poor or with $120,000 worth of college loans, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, but soon enough they're being given free clothes to wear, or soon enough they're being enticed into investing in this sort of thing or that sort of thing. And next thing you know, their bank accounts are pretty well padded. They have a pretty good future once they retire from office. And once they retire, right, what about their medical benefits? The rest of America, if we want to keep our medical benefits at our private sector employer, it costs a pretty penny. If you've ever done the Cobra thing, you know that all of a sudden your eyes are just widened wide as they can go at that first Cobra payment. Because then it dawns on you, wow, my employer was really paying quite a bit of this medical and dental and so forth. I don't know if I can afford this. But Congress, congressional members, retiring congressional members who serve 1 or 2 years and then they move on to something else, they don't have to worry about those things. They're taken care of. And this all goes back to the original question. How many times have you voted for a politician and they have not fulfilled what they promised on the campaign trail? And so if you're one of those unheard of Americans who can answer that and say never, then it's only because you don't vote. Because for the rest of America who actually vote for politicians, all of us have felt at least at one time, at least at one point in history, at least with one candidate, whether local, state, or federal, that our promises have been completely tossed to the side. Obamacare, Republicans on Obamacare, Republicans on that whole gay marriage issue that they actually don't even fight anymore. There's a lot of betrayal going on. And so how about another party, right? A third party. How about a Libertarian Party, for instance? How about a Constitution Party? There are options out there. Whether they are viable or not, that remains to be seen. That's a choice of the individual voter. Do you want to vote for Republicans who are going to betray you, or Democrats who are little despots, right? Who are little Marxists and communists and collectivists and so forth. So maybe there'll be a point where you might consider a different party, a different vote, a different type of candidate. I have with me today a guest, Keith Redhead. He just won his Libertarian Party election to town supervisor in Ava, New York, and he says libertarians and their principles and platforms are actually resonating with a lot of voters across America who are sick and tired of the government overreach. Keith Redhead, thank you so much for being on Bold and Blunt. It is great to have you here.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So let's talk about the Libertarian Party. How is it doing in terms of election wins?
Well, I think we have a strong focus on running local candidates. We see that there's a lot more payout in running a smaller local campaign than sometimes running statewide or national campaigns. So there's a large focus in running for towns, city councils, town councils, and positions like that.
And what is it about the Libertarian Party that is resonating with local voters lately?
I think there's a couple things that factor into that, and one is there's a lot of discontent, I think, in general with politics and business as usual in government, whether it be the Republicans or Democrats. People are very much looking for a third option that more aligns with them. And the thing, I think, specifically that Libertarian offers compared to other third parties is we really much just want the government to back off of people's lives. I think over the last few years, people have kind of had enough of the overreach of government into their personal lives, whether it's medical issues or even some local issues like zoning issues. People just want to be left alone a little bit more and have government kind of slow down.
I want to get into the nuts and bolts of libertarian platforms, but just to put it in a little bit layman's context, would you say libertarianism is more closely aligned with classical liberalism or conservatism?
Oh, that's a tough one. I think if we take the definition of classical liberalism, whereas government, if it does exist, it must exist to protect people's rights and have minimal influence and involvement in their lives. And conservatism, I think, sometimes gets a lot wrapped up into, I think, like modern conservatism, more or less supposed to be classical liberalism, but is kind of pushed further away from that. So I'm not sure if libertarianism itself really aligns with the modern way that the conservative movement has moved.
Yeah, the labels have shifted over the years and watered down, and lines have been blurred. So that is a tough question to address. So
especially in, like you said, in modern terms, they've changed so much. It's hard to as I was running here as a libertarian, a lot of people confuse that with being liberal.
Right.
As we understand, sure, in the classical sense, it does. But when you use the term liberal today, it means something very different than classical liberalism.
So let's break it down, the negatives and positives of libertarian platforms and so forth. I know through the years that some of the negatives that have come to the forefront of the Libertarian Party have been these three things. First off, legalized drug use. Second off, legalized drug use and prostitution. Second off, open borders. And third off, the perception that many in the Libertarian Party are atheists. Can you speak to those three things?
Sure. So I'll start with the drug issue first. There's the concern that with legalizing drugs, all of a sudden, you're going to have everybody addicted to drugs. I think it was Ron Paul in one of his debates, we're going over a decade ago now, had asked, basically, if we legalize drugs tomorrow, does that mean everybody in this room is going to go out and do heroin? Well, the answer is no. Drugs are already available, whether you want them legalized or not, they're available. So having access to drugs isn't going to necessarily create more use, but it would prevent things such as fentanyl overdoses, because if it's regulated in the market, you will have a better way of testing products. There's one argument for legalizing drugs. I think the other argument is that the war on drugs itself has wholly failed. It hasn't prevented anybody from doing drugs, but it's put a whole lot of people in prison for victimless crimes. So I think that's kind of the libertarian stance on that. The second issue, I think you said, was open borders.
Yes.
There's still a lot of debate within the Libertarian Party itself as to answer on open borders. My personal stance is open borders is step 10 of libertarianism, and we're only on step 1. So in the ideal world, we'd be at step 10. The United States is a libertarian country. We've broken down the welfare state. We've ended our imperial wars and all those issues. And sure, at that point, open borders make sense. But personally, I'm at the point where, like I said, we're on step 1. We should probably figure out what's happening here in our state before we just allow anybody and everybody to come on in. But like I said, that's still much debated in the libertarian circles. And as far as being atheist, I think that's a tough question. There's all sorts of religions and any acceptability within the Libertarian Party.
And just to go back to I grouped with legalizing drugs, legalizing prostitution as well. Just speak.
Okay. Yeah, I think that kind of goes along with the issues where if you were able to legalize prostitution, that you would be able to have a safer market for that. Prostitution, as we know, exists right now, whether it's legal or not. So being able to have a market where it's protected, where you could be tested for sexually transmitted diseases and stuff like that, you'd have a safer market for women and, I guess, the men that are involved in those transactions. I think one of the issues I've had locally with explaining libertarianism is that a lot of people think it's very much live and let live, whereas yes, that's our philosophy, but it doesn't necessarily mean that as individuals we support these things. I personally am not in support of prostitution. I wouldn't allow my wife to go prostitute herself, but I'm not in the business of making the government tell someone, yes, you can, no, you can't do sort of things like this.
Yeah, it's really a seamless logic that courses through the Libertarian Party is basically my takeaway from it. And I just wanted to get the cultural issues out there up front before we move on to things like the economy and foreign policy and government's rightful role in America. So in the libertarian viewpoint, speak to those issues. The economy, how you see, as far as the free market goes,
Sure.
You're definitely on the side of the free market. I understand that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think it's very apparent right now that we are in the middle of a recession that continues to get worse. And the libertarian understanding of that is it's due to inflation, which has nothing to do with businesses raising their prices on their own or greed. It ultimately comes from two things, and one of those is printing trillions of dollars through the Federal Reserve, which happened in 2020. Well, it's happened for the last 100 years, but our recent bout with inflation started with the printing of $9 trillion in 2020 to go out towards COVID relief. And the other issue that creates inflation is overtaxing. Those are two things that lessen the value of your dollar. So the libertarian stance is that, one, we'd like to get rid of the Federal Reserve if we could, because there's a whole lot of issues with that.
Right.
And two is reducing government taxation. It would allow your dollar to go a lot further if you weren't overtaxed.
And at this point in time, is it feasible to ever advocate for a return to the gold standard? Or has that ship been sunk already?
I personally don't believe so. I think there needs to be some alternative currencies. There's some people are heavily involved in cryptocurrencies. I like the idea of a sound money system that is backed by whether it be precious metals. I think as far as cryptocurrency, the benefit there is that it's decentralized and can't be controlled by the government itself. We saw, especially in Canada, with the trucker protest, that banks under the government control were allowed to just freeze people's assets, whereas with cryptocurrency or even using precious metals, those things can't necessarily be cut off so directly and immediately.
Yeah, because the fiat system, another way of looking at it is just, it's almost like magic money, right? It's not based on anything tangible.
Right, yeah, I listened to a podcast who calls it Babylonian money magic. It's just, You're just making up numbers out of nowhere, printing numbers, adding numbers. You just add tens of zeros, and then you've got a new money supply.
Yeah. And I guess on the local level, you guys don't weigh too much into that. So let's just, you say the Libertarian Party in general has been looking at local elections and so forth. So when you deal with school boards and running candidates for school boards, what are some of the things that make your candidates stand out versus Republican and Democrat?
Well, I'm actually on my local school board currently.
Excellent.
And I think one of the things that resonated with a lot of people is the focus on the individual and the individual's responsibility to their family, whereas we don't want the state making choices for our children. Outside of reading, writing, and arithmetic, there's a lot of things that we believe should belong to the family. So when I ran my campaign for running for school board, that was kind of my focus, is how do we get more involvement from local families in directing education rather than depending on the state, or in our case, from Albany itself.
Well, the timing for that message is perfect because parents across the nation have sort of risen up in backlash against their school boards after watching under COVID what their kids were being taught, but then also being targeted for standing up for parental rights.
Right, absolutely. And the Libertarian Party is big on that idea that families should be able to have that influence in their schools and be involved.
I'm betting the Libertarian Party message resonates well in local communities where people have to deal with zoning issues or boards of supervisors over land control and environmental clampdowns on development and just freedoms in general.
Yeah, as far as zoning issues, the Libertarian Party is very much in the idea that if you purchase the property and are able to use that property without any negative effects on your neighbors, then so be it.
So where are you finding the Libertarian Party having sort of the largest swell in recent years? Has there been a surge of Libertarian Party candidates in certain spots of communities around the nation where the message is resonating most?
I think it very much depends on the state you're in. The state of New York, where I am, has been ranked by many institutes as the least freest state in the country based on different metrics. So I think having that type of oppression from the state very much pushes people towards ideas of libertarianism, whereas you also have states like New Hampshire or West Virginia that are ranked, up in the top 5 of freest states, where it's almost part of their culture, like, oh, well, of course we're libertarian, of course we have these ideas of individual rights. So I see a lot of the oppression in states like New York or California kind of pushing people towards, you know what, this doesn't seem to be working out this way, having so much government control over our lives. How can we change this? What ideologies actually fit in with a direction that would fix this? And I think that's where kind of libertarian answers that question.
So just to wrap, because I know our time is coming to an end now, Keith, looking forward to the next cycle of elections, what issues are Libertarian candidates going to harp on? I assume the parental rights is going to continue to be huge, but what else do you see as your winning platforms?
I think generally people vote based on their wallets, and right now the state of the economy is crushing people. It's crushing families. I know I run a business, and I know many friends that are in similar business as me that are bordering on closing their doors. It's something that needs to be solved, and I think having some economic solutions to rein in government restrictions and regulations that might hurt businesses, or even just the money printing itself. These are issues that need to be expressed to people on a level and a way that they'll be able to understand it, as far as having a solution from the Libertarian Party. And I definitely think parental rights is an issue. And I don't think the COVID medical issues have gone away either. I think people are very much focused on trying to figure out a way to get away from the medical system. I know the rate of even childhood vaccinations now is decreased as many parents are opting out. So I think these are big, important issues that most people have that are kind of overshadowed by the mainstream media in many ways, where they just focus nothing else but war constantly, whether it's Ukraine, Russia, or Palestine, Israel. I think those issues that overshadow the real issues people have kind of seem to take the front seat most of the time.
I think you nailed it with those three issues. And I did forget to bring up the COVID mandates, much of which took place at the local level. A local health bureaucrat mandating that stores require people to wear face masks, or businesses require employees to get these shots and so forth. And just quickly to add in this one last question, where did the Libertarian Party stand on the mandates, the face masking, the shots, and so forth?
I believe that in general, the Libertarian Party is against those things in the sense that they shouldn't be coming from the government mandates. I personally was in the middle of that with running my business in December of 2021. New York State had kind of seen that at the state level they weren't going to be able to enforce these mandates any longer, and they kicked it down to the county to see if the counties could enforce it. Well, my county attempted to, and it suggested that businesses need to either have customers mask up or check vaccine cards. Well, I had refused to do so with my business, and the county tried fining me $27,000. So on a local level, you're absolutely right that the people kind of forgot that it's not just the federal government, the state that can come down on you. It's local, county, and municipalities that can also try to crush you.
Did you have to pay? Or
I did not pay anything.
Wow. You know what? Just for that single issue alone, I would vote for you myself. I just got so fed up with the local bureaucrats running roughshod over private businesses and citizens. So thank you for your stand. Thank you for refusing on that. Well, Keith Redhead, I want to thank you very much for being on Bold and Blunt. It was a fascinating discussion, and best wishes going forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
The Libertarian Party, check it out. Maybe they have something more to offer you, especially at the local level of politics, than the Republican Party or the Democrats, the entrenched two-party system we have in place in America. Thank you for listening. I want to remind you, if you like Bold and Blunt, you may get Bold and Blunt at edify.app, at washingtontimes.com, at Real Life Network, and wherever podcasts are offered. Tune in next time. In the meanwhile, don't forget, stay blunt, stay bold.